So, hello and welcome everybody. I'm Isa Buencamino. I am the founder and one of the coaches of WOW, Women of the World Group Coaching Program. So here you can find our QR codes for the WOW Instagram account and LinkedIn. Do follow us and join our WOW community. As I said earlier, we have a real mix of women here today. We have participants from different parts of the world, from different sectors, and everyone is welcome here. A special shout out to members of the Lux community who are here today. So Lux is a beauty brand who strongly advocates women empowerment and advocacy we share, and we are very happy to collaborate with them. We are actually very open to collaboration. So if this is something that interests you, please reach out to us. So a little bit of WOW, a little bit about WOW before I pass on the floor to Catherine. So WOW is an all-women global group coaching program for women who want to make an impact and want to proactively shape the next stage of their careers and lives. We have 4 coaching programs. The senior program is for women who are contemplating their legacy, experienced women at the height or at the end of their first careers, and we help them decide who gets to benefit from the next phase of their careers or golden era of their lives. Then we have the main program. It's for women who are in the trajectory of their careers. We coach them through resilience and grit to support them to achieve their dreams and goals and live their best lives. Then we have the WOW Foundation program. It's for women at the start of their careers, and we help anchor them to what makes them already amazing so that they can truly unleash their potential. Our newest program is WOW Moms for women who are looking for balance between living their best lives while caring for others. It's best for moms going back to work after maternity break or moms who want to improve the balance of their lives and meet other women going through the same thing as them. Now, the masterclass sessions are supplementary sessions to our main coaching program. Masterclasses are delivered monthly, and it helps us promote continuous learning and keep our community feel connected and supported. The masterclass sessions have 3 types of formats. We have talks from specialists and inspiring female role models, workshops, and interviews. Now, leading the masterclass today is WOW coach and co-founder Catherine Ward. And the focus of the interview will be Women on Boards, the Executive Mom. Now, this is part of our Stairway to the Executive Board series. Catherine is a non-executive director, a former global chief people officer with over 30 years of business and leadership experience. She has been a chief people officer for 3 different types of organizations: BMI Healthcare, a private hospital group; Interserve, formerly a facilities management and construction group; the British Council, which represents the UK in over 100 countries globally. Now, Catherine has been based in London for most of her career and has lived and worked in Guyana, Lesotho, and Hungary. Her passion for supporting women's development started when she was working overseas and saw the impact of unequal opportunities on women and girls. Wow, Catherine. I pass the floor to you, Catherine, to start the interview with Marjorie.
Oh, well, good afternoon. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to what's going to be a really wonderful session with Marjorie. But I'll just start the conversation by framing the purpose of these sessions, Stairway to the Board. So this started because women would say to me, how did you do it? How did you get a career that led you to the executive board? And my aim now is to try and demystify that. When I've done it before and talked about the reality of a career to the board, women have found it really reassuring. It sort of tallies with the experiences they're currently going through and reassures them that it's not unusual. And I think it also helps to learn from those of us, myself, Marjorie, who've done this, you know, how we got there, our insights, hints, tips, and honest reflections. So my aim really is to make this relatable and very down to earth and honest. And so I'm delighted to be joined by Marjorie. Marjorie's extraordinary career of 25 years experience across Asia, Europe, and Australia, with roles like Managing Director, CEO, Global Vice President Marketing, Regional Marketing Director in multinational companies that you will have heard of: Unilever, Coca-Cola, Friesland, Campina, and Danone. And her wide experience with all of those multicultural organisations and teams has really sparked her passion for inclusive diversity. and making sure that there are equitable opportunities for people in the organisation and to create really high team engagement. She is a mother of 3 children, a single mother of 3 children who are now adults, and their family moved with her as she worked in multiple countries: Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, France, Australia. And now her children carry on their multicultural life in the USA, with Boston and New York City, where they're both studying. Marjorie is co-founder of the Chrysalis Group, a leadership consultancy and coaching company, and is a coach with Wow Coaching. And Marjorie is also very fascinating to listen to and a fantastic presenter. So I'm going to leave her to do most of the talking, and I'm just going to prompt her along the way so that you can enjoy hearing her insights and stories. So Marjorie, to start with, why do it? Why aim for the board?
Gosh, hi, Catherine. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone from different parts of the world. I can see that we've got people from all the different regions. It's good to see people. Many of you are, of course, familiar and old friends and people I've heard of. So to Catherine's question, I mean, really, why the board? To be honest, I wasn't actually aiming for the board at first, right? I mean, I remember a time when I was 29 years old, and I had 3 children at that time, all age below 4 years old, right? So I was breastfeeding a baby, and my 2 other toddlers were like pulling at my skirt and just wanting me to pay attention to them. And I remember just sitting there and thinking, oh my God, I love my kids and I want this family, but I think I want more for myself. So I want family and a career. So to be honest, Catherine, it wasn't really about I want the board, but really the first decision point was I'm not going to only be a stay-at-home mom, right? So I want to be a mom with a family, but also have a career. What happened was the reality was that as I began to gain more experience at work and just matured and increasingly senior roles, I realized that it was actually quite important to have a female voice at the executive board level, right? So it's really because at the end of the day, a board's impact is so much more wider reaching than just your own function, right? It's not just marketing, sales, or your business unit. When you're in the board, you're able to influence a company's agenda, especially with topics close to my heart, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So DEI. And really, at the end of the day, female voices, each of us around this room, can really provide this diversity of thinking at the board level that otherwise wouldn't be there if we were not actually having a seat at the table.
Well, I think it's so important that women's voices are heard. We'll come on to talk more about the importance of women's voices, but actually in order to really understand why it's so important for women's voices to be heard, what exactly is the job of being on a board? How is it different to other jobs and the jobs that went before at a divisional level?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I found that boards at job level, jobs at board level are actually quite different, right? It was quite eye-opening and frankly, I found it quite engaging. So one, the mindset is no longer just in the function, right? As I said before, the mindset is actually total company. Your team is no longer you and your direct reports, and instead your main team is actually the board team, right? So because of that, and because the board team is cross-functional, it's a very different job. So one, it's so much wider reaching. So you're thinking more about the entire business entity and all the functions at the same time. There's a wider impact. So you're really looking at how the business can continue, right? Both in the short term and the long-term sustainability. As a board member, you manage both internal topics, right, for company needs, but also become very externally oriented. So shareholders, external stakeholders, right? So that all becomes part of the picture. And it's also both executional. So you wanted to decide requirements for now, but also strategic, meaning really looking at a sustainable future for the company, right? So it's broad and different. It's really exciting stuff.
It is really exciting stuff. I mean, I found that it's quite a leap really from going from being a functional head, I was functional head in HR, to sitting on the board. And there, your debate is really about the whole breadth of what the company is doing and its purpose and its strategies and its policies. And then you take from that piece that you have to interpret for your particular specialism and craft it to ensure that you can deliver that wider strategy. So it's massively stimulating. It's a huge privilege to be able to sort of look right across an organization and look at its impact and actually be able to play a part in shaping it, which I guess is what brings me to my next question is, given that the influence that you have when you're sitting at executive board level, why is it so important to encourage more women to aspire to get onto the board?
Well, guys, there's simply not enough women on executive boards. It's just not enough. As I said before, our perspectives could be quite different. And this really does lead to a diversity of thinking, right? And in the exec board team. What I like about it as well is one could represent women's needs, right? And influence a different set of policies. So I'll give an example. So tonight, right, is Idul Fitri. It's the end of the Ramadan period, this very day. In Indonesia, where I used to work, what happens during the Ramadan period is that it's customary for the household help and the nannies to actually go back to their provinces. And this becomes a very big problem for working parents, especially working moms, because suddenly there's no one taking care of their babies and toddlers back home. So this topic was discussed at board level. And trust me, it was one of the women in the group who brought it up. And the solution was quite simple, that the company just decided to transform one of our meeting rooms into a nursery. So for an entire month, whilst all the help is gone, parents can really just drop off their babies and toddlers on this, meeting room converted nursery and trust that there are caregivers there to take care of their kids whilst they're working. So it is really an amazing solution. And to be honest, can only be brought about by having a diversity of thinking at board level, right? Just on the topic, I just wanted to add one more thing, right, which is quite close to my belief as well. So having females on boards can make a difference, but only when you have enough of a voice, right? So I would really say, let's not just go for a token female, just so that a board can say we have a female member. Let's really just push for a more sizable representation. I mean, at least 30% of board members, I think, needs to be female, just so that there's a proper voice on the table.
And I remember that myself. I was the only woman on a board for a long time, and it's quite tough holding your energy against all this male energy. And it made a real difference when a second woman joined the board, more than just doubling of having two of us on the board. Suddenly you had a whole dynamic that was possible with two of you. So if there were 30% women on a board, again, I think that would really start to change the way in which a board looked at, again, its shareholders, its customers, its employees, the people in the community around it, with that sort of real true diversity of approaches around the table. But I just wanted to touch on some research. So some of you may have come across the Cranfield University research. It's been running for 25 years. It is UK focused, but it's got a very good reputation because it's been tracking the representation of women on boards for 25 years and reporting annually. And what they found is, that during that time in the UK, the representation of women on non-exec boards has massively improved. It's now not far off 50-50, about 43%. But when you look at chief execs, so the real, seat of influence in a company, this is still lamentable, quite honestly. So the FTSE, the FTSE 100, the top 100 listed companies in the UK, many of which are operating internationally. In fact, most of the FTSE 100 would be international companies. There's only 16% of women are on the executive board and 12% on the FTSE 250. And there are actually only 9 chief execs and 12 on the 250. So in the top 350 companies, there are only just about 20 of them are female CEOs. So the battle is far from over, and if we're sort of saying that this is where decisions are led from that can really affect broadly out into the world, that's quite a worry. And what's more of a worry right now is that, I know we've all talked about the Great Resignation, which seems to be affecting more women than men. So more women than men seem to be opting out of, the corporate career path. We don't really know where that's happening. There's a lot of debate about it, but there's no really good quality data yet about why that's happening. But one of the real worries about that, of course, is that after fighting so hard to get this representation at board and executive board and main board level, there's now a weakening of the pathways, a weakening of the succession to those levels. So it's quite a disturbing point to think that, after these battles are being won, they're now in danger of reversing. So it is critical that women continue to aim for key roles at most senior level and to stay in the running.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as I said, we don't really know why they're bailing out, but one of the debates that's always been had around women at very senior levels is how can women juggle a career with having children? Marjorie, you have done that, and travelled around the world with your family as well. Can you tell us how you did it?
No. Okay, so it's not easy, and it wasn't straightforward, right? I would say that it did take a lot of heart, and both a courageous heart and a loving heart, right? So you kind of need both. Early on, there were a few principles that I personally embraced to choose this path, right? So I think one piece was around career and family go hand in hand, right? So to me, they were not exclusive to each other. Careers and families can go together. What that meant in practice is that, I'll give an example. So I used to travel quite frequently for work and when I was in regional and global roles. So I actually used it as an opportunity to provide a geography lesson, right? So I bought a gigantic globe that was sitting in the house. And whilst I was packing up my suitcase, we would actually pin where in the globe mom was about to fly to, right? When I landed that country, I would purchase postcards and actually write each of my children and mail it out. Right. So it's nice because then at some point they kind of receive snail mail from different countries around the world. I would, because we're a musically oriented family, so I would also purchase and go shopping for local musical instruments, right? So again, that's nice. You come home and there's a lot of things for them to play with. So it's in a way they kind of experience a bit where I went to, right? So that's one piece, and just how to mix career and family. The other principle I had was that we're all one team, right? Parents and children are one team. So my kids were actually quite proud that they had a mom who was working, because obviously in school they would see moms around the dads were out. So they always saw me as, yep, my mom's like the other dads who work, and that I would be traveling, right? So my mom's always in airplanes. So they thought it was cool. But at the same time, we would really support each other. So yes, I would be in school for their programs and presentations, but at the same time, when I would be hosting my team or my office mates at home for work activities, my kids would be there to help entertain them, right? So they'll be chatting with them, they'll be performing like their little music thing, so that sort of thing. So it was kind of combined in the team effort. I think the third principle I had was I was fully cognizant that it really does take a village to raise children. So I'm very big on asking for help, right? Uh, Again, I would travel extensively. So when I knew that I would be out for more than a week, like sometimes it would run 2-3 weeks, I would, and remember I was living in foreign countries, right? As we were just saying, I would actually just phone up my, a sister or a cousin or an aunt and offer up hey, do you want to have 2 weeks holiday in Bangkok? Here's a free house, here's some car, enjoy yourself. And I just needed to be here with for my kids. So in a way, that was how I managed it, right? Just asking for help. I think it's important to note, and remember, guys, because it was mentioned that I was a single mom as well, right? In order to succeed as a working mom in general, and especially when you get to the exec board level, the first conversation actually has to be with your partner, right? Be it your husband or your partner, because it's really just a discussion of how do we run this family? How do we help with childcare? Who does what and when? In my case, because I was a single parent, I didn't have anyone to discuss that with. So I was just quite fortunate that in Asia we actually have what I would say relatively more affordable childcare help. So I had a nanny, right? And had a nanny who actually moved around with us in each of the countries. And that way, she actually was almost like my semi stay-at-home wife to help with the kids and moving and things. Um, it also meant that I made different career decisions. So, for example, I would not accept expatriate roles to Europe because that actually meant I won't be able to bring my nanny there because you can't get a work permit for an Asian maid in Europe. So earlier on, that was something that I knew was a choice I was making, but at the end of the day, it was also the support I needed for the path we were on. But
Mm.
yeah, at the end, Catherine, I guess I'm saying you kind of one needs to be a bit more intentional and purposeful in terms of
Mm.
why we make choices.
Mm. And when we talked about this before, we talked about the situation in Europe, and the women I knew who had juggled children and a high level job, and they all had made those plans. So they all knew what their support network was. Whether they'd had discussions with their husband or partner as to how they were going to balance out the roles, that was critical, and also where the help was going to come from. And there was always that sense that you have to invest in the support structure around you, both whether that is where you're drawing on your partner and drawing on other family members, or if you're employing somebody to support you with your childcare. Those are conscious decisions that have to be factored into the whole piece. And although in the European situation, as you say, is slightly different, again, people did do that. They put those infrastructures in place around themselves with the right support to make sure that they could work, and they could work with without worry about what was happening to their children, because they were confident in the support that their children were getting as well. So I think that's quite a big set of decisions for people to very consciously make when they're at these critical career points, where really you can't do it on your own anymore. You do need to acknowledge and accept that you're going to have to put a proper support network in place. Yeah. We're going to break some questions soon, but if I could just ask you one more question before we move to opening up the questions to everybody else. And that's, obviously we're still on the subject of mothers on the board. And what advice would you give to other women about how to manage that?
Wow. Well, okay. I think there's one around work opportunities. I would say raise your hand and say yes. Okay. So a very big difference between men and women, right? Men just tend to say yes and accept jobs even if they don't think they're ready yet because they'll just wing it. For women, we're always, oh, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not gonna raise my hand. So my one advice is go for the work opportunities. Just say yes, right? So as a person, I'm forever curious. I love learning new things, and I know very well that I don't know everything, right? So this has actually helped keep me open to different opportunities. And I know I have quite a humble mindset in that, so much so that it's never an issue for me having imposter syndrome because I always think I just do my role, right? So whatever title my role happens to be at that time, my mindset is just learn the best, do your best, and give it your all, right? So for me, first advice, really, guys, is just raise your hand, say yes to those roles. The second piece is actually about me embracing self-care. And remember, we're of a certain age, self-care wasn't a thing 20 years ago, I can tell you that. Not really the way it is now, but it was something that I had to really embrace for myself. And again, we've mentioned I'm a single parent. For all the parents in the room, you know that childcare just doesn't stop, right? It just caring for your family is just an ongoing thing. And when you don't have a partner to rely on, it's 100% on you. And you also have work. So early on, I actually decided for myself that I would put boundaries around that. And therefore, I had an escape and recharge moment, right? So um, it's structured, it's in my calendar. Every 6 weeks, I would take the weekend off my family, right? So I would go by myself. I would go scuba diving because I just love the ocean. And to be honest, when I'm underwater in those remote islands, right, it's just me and it's just the ocean around me, just, wrapping itself. It's all the sea life and I see there, and there are no mobile phone signals anywhere. So it's a really wonderful escape to have. And it's my respite. And at the end of the weekend, I do come back home re-energized, relaxed, and therefore capable of just pouring a lot of love on my kids, right? So go for the work opportunities, make sure you escape and recharge. And I think there's a third advice I would give, which is, guilt, really, because all of us feel guilty. Right? I feel guilty all the time. So I'm just going to say it's always there, right? So I wasn't able to attend my son's science presentation because a meeting from work just overran late, right? Or I wasn't able to join my company's workshop because I had to rush to the hospital because my daughter broke her foot. Or despite an entire week of not joining my family for dinner because I had guests at work, when the weekend came, because it was weekend number 6, I still left and went on that beach trip, right? So there's many things and many of these choices that one makes that I had to make every time. And so for me, this notion of guilt really, if it's just a matter of reframing it. We had one of the WOW coaches, Jocelyn, talk about that in the last session of our masterclass, right? About the importance of reframing. And for me, that's a very good mindset to have, which is you just change the narrative. Okay. There will always be moments where you need to make a choice. And it's never a hard and fast rule that work is a priority, children are the priority, or myself is the priority. It really depends on what the context is and what's happening at that particular moment. So I would say whether it's career, parenting, or self-care, know that it's going to be an ongoing series of choices. And really, I just had to trust myself that I was making the best choice that I could at that moment. And then that's it. We just try our best each and every time.
That's fabulous. I love that. That just make sure that you're always making the right choices. Life is a series of choices, and dealing with them all in the moment, but in a considered way, taking, recognizing this is a choice or a crossroads and taking it. And I love as well the advice about reframing. It seems it's quite a good point to take a break, to ask some questions. When we're going to go on to talk generally about getting to the board, how you go about it, and tips and advice there on literally how do you get onto that pathway, how do you support people on that pathway. So we're going to come on to talk about that. But if there's anything that we've covered so far, please ask questions. And Isa, I think you're going to pull a few out for us.
Yeah. So there's one question from Ria Puangco, and she's asking, how do you keep your children connected to their Philippine heritage or their roots, even when they grew up as third culture kids?
Yeah. Hi, Ria. It's a good question. So for sure we had Christmas holidays and summer holidays in Manila, right? So that was also a structural choice where the 3 weeks of Christmas break would always be back home, and the 8 to 12 weeks of summer holidays was also back home. Because it's also my children for a long time used to be the only grandchildren both sides of the family. So even if I was a single parent, they got to see both sides, and for sure that's how time was divided. So my kids grew up, well, when they were really young, below the age of 5, we were in Thailand at the time, so they thought they were Thai. admittedly. But as they grew up into teenagers, 10, 11, 12, then they knew they were Filipino. And yeah, and then they kind of think of the Philippines as their cultural home, or at least where their family sits. But obviously their identity is formed differently, right? Because they've been moving every 2, 3 years. So then they've got a bit more of a global citizenship as a thinking. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Marjorie. There's a comment from Emily. She mentioned that it's very important to manage the expectations of your company too. So there's something about managing the relationship with your employer and your boss. So she said she's very vocal and clear about the hours that she would work and her commitment. So while she was still breastfeeding when she came back, and her male boss was super supportive and knew that it was important. So maybe Marjorie, can you tell more about how your relationship with your employer? Was anything that you can share about how you manage that?
Yeah, no, hi Emily. I think it's great that you're able to have those types of conversations. I will admit, back in the late 90s, I wasn't able to do that. So I'll tell you a bit of a story. I was breastfeeding too when I got back to work. We only had a 2-month maternity leave at the point, and I was doing a regional job. So I would be pumping in hotel rooms. I remember in Mumbai, calling the hotel staff and actually asking them to put my milk bags into their hotel freezer for me to take out the next day, right? So you kind of manage. Now, to Isa's question of how do you then manage that with your bosses and teams and work? So there were a couple of things. In reality, I actually felt pressured to actually separate, well, not even separate, to just make sure that I was doing all my best for the kids and all my best for work. It was only, I think, once I had my third child, so third round, that I kind of thought, well, hold on, I kind of need to manage this differently. So much like what Emily's saying, it is a conversation around my boss in terms of, look, I have a baby at home. I have kids have started school. There will be times when on a Friday afternoon, there's a little school program. So, sorry, because my boss, who was male, noticed that I was filing half-day vacation leaves. So he was like, "What's this?" And I said, "Oh, no, because I need to go to school for my kids, etc." And actually, he was quite supportive. He was like, "No, you don't need to do that. Just go." So in a way, Isa, I guess it's really just a matter of just being quite open, because most people are parents, right? Male or female. And therefore, and obviously depending on how active fathers are, they will be able to understand many of these things. Now, I will say that's also underpinned by being trusted in delivering good work, right? Because if you also have a good track record, the trust is there and they know that you're going to give the results one way or another. And therefore requests like this is just part and parcel of what one needs to.
Mm, thank you. I'd like to say something about that. Asking, you don't get
Yeah,
if you don't
asking.
ask. I think you'll find most people will want to help you. I do understand that sometimes, at least for me, that you don't want to ask for help because you don't want to appear weak. You want to be strong. I can do this with all my kids, and I don't want to ask, but ask.
Mm.
You can ask.
And probably you've been on the other side, Marjorie, where people have come to you
Exactly.
to ask for time. And actually, it really isn't a deal, is it? If you trust this person to always deliver, and you know that they will make it work somehow, they'll make up the time,
Correct.
but they'll deliver whatever it is. To be honest, you sort of think, it's just not an issue at all, actually. And so that fear is in the person asking mind, because you as the manager going, well, yes, of course, that's fine. You're at a very senior level. I trust you to deliver. And, I respect the fact that you are able to balance out, these other calls on your time with your work time. So, yeah, Isa, ask, because I think most people will actually be sympathetic. Yeah, I can't actually think of anybody who wasn't sympathetic at these senior levels. I admit it can be harder or junior levels because your manager may not be experienced enough to be able to take that perspective. Mhm.
So, Catherine, there are three more comments here, but two I think you can pick up later when you're talking about getting up to the board. So, Tan is asking about how you handle imposter syndrome when you climb up the corporate ladder. And there's another question from Anne about how to take care of yourself as you're doing this, climbing up the ladder. But there's one question about parenthood. Let's go back to Emily Porter Salmon. She says, you've worked, Marjorie, internationally across different cultures. As a parent, I'm a woman of East Asian heritage living and working in the UK. And I found expectations of parenting standards on the part of my colleagues quite different from my background. So do you have any experience of this or advice on how to address these cultural differences?
Hi, Emily. Good question.
Yeah,
The,
really good.
yeah, no, and it's funny, right? So earlier I said for us working women, part of the solution is actually first and foremost to have a conversation with your partner or husband, right? Because support starts from home. And indeed, the reality is that's a very culturally nuanced conversation where, depending on your culture, many societies still kind of expect the woman to be having the majority role in family care and childcare. Um, there are some cultures also, and put yourself in your husband's or your partner's shoes, where men are expected to deliver and bring home the bacon, right? No questions asked. So I would say that comes both sides of the coin. So if the question is really parenting standards, okay, if it's your colleagues, I personally I would ignore it because it's like, sorry, I kind of these are the choices I'm making for my family because that's what I think is right, right? So I honestly I think we kind of need to have a bit of a thick skin in terms of really choosing whose point of view matters and why, right? As with many things in life. So I would say if it was your manager, yes. If it's your colleagues, maybe you make them understand in the language or the perspective that they have, right? Maybe use it as I don't know, an education moment. Open up their eyes that the world just doesn't revolve around the UK, right? That said, I have to say I find the UK to be quite diverse. I've actually been in situations where people are actually a bit more close in thinking. Um, but yeah, no, so I would say you could use that opportunity to open up other people to different cultural contexts. And sometimes you just have to say, well, these are the choices I'm making for my family because that's what I feel is right for myself and them. But I would say it's as straightforward as that.
It's great. So as I said, we wanted now to just broaden out the discussion a little more, which is really to talk about how you get onto the path to the board and your sort of top tips, Marjorie, for staying on that path
Okay.
to the board.
Okay. So there's something that I wish I had earlier on in my career that I only had later on. So one is the role of mentors, sponsors, and coaches. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is don't go at it alone. Okay. So mentors are really good, right? Because they help equip you. So they help you navigate, they help you develop yourself. So that's quite important. Sponsors are equally important. And to be honest, not all women we're quite shy in actually creating sponsors. And we shouldn't be, right? Because sponsors in your company actually help you navigate. They can help get you noticed, right? And they can help guide your career, really, especially if they're all senior guys who've been in different places. So sponsors and mentors internal. I think the other piece was really the role of coaches, right? Coaches get a person from being good to great. And, since we are talking about women of the world and coaching, let me just say this. I found that, there's a certain magic and wonderful energy when women are coached together as a group, because we kind of realize we're not alone and we gain insights from each other, which, for example, I hope we're doing right now, right? With this session. So this Women in the World is actually quite good because not only do we do coaching groups for women, we also even have programs for moms, as Isa said a while ago, of which I'm actually a coach of as well. And it's quite good. So I would say mentors, sponsors, coaches, please get them because it will be a really good support group for yourself professionally. The second piece is, let me just repeat what I said earlier about volunteering, right? And just saying yes. So it really does include lean in, make yourself conspicuous. Okay. Don't be a shy wallflower. Really lean in, make yourself get heard, be involved, let others see your good work, make sure that you get networked, right? And I think the third advice I'd have would be, is let me do a little quote. So there's an English author called James Norbury. Like, he writes books about Big Panda and Tiny Dragon. I'm not sure how many of you guys know that. And there's a little excerpt that I loved, right? So one of the characters, Big Panda, actually asked Tiny Dragon, which is more important, the journey or the destination? And Tiny Dragon answers, the company, right? Because, guys, first and foremost, enjoy it, right? Relish and enjoy the time with your team because it's really just being with people, and your staff and your groups, that will really just make it worth it. And I would say just having those things actually keep you engaged in your role, giving your best, and actually does deliver more senior roles eventually towards the board.
Well, that's fantastic. It's just really great set of bits of advice. And I would really reinforce the be conspicuous piece, because it comes up for me again and again in coaching that people say, oh, I really wish I could do such and such. And I say, have you actually told your boss or told the person that can influence this to happen? And then they're astonished when they go and they have that conversation for the first time. And instead of fearing that they get pushed back, instead of the person's just surprised, why didn't you mention this to me before? And I had this personally quite recently actually. So in connection with an NED job, and somebody said to me, don't assume they just know what you've done and all the things you've done in your career. You need to go tell them, join the dots for them. So it kind of never ends, that bit of advice, the need to let people know. So speak up and let people know.
Absolutely.
So that's fantastic. So we've talked about being on a board, we talked about how to get there, but was it always plain sailing? And if there were setbacks, what were they and how did you cope with them?
Oh, yeah, come on, it's life. Yeah, so there will always be headwinds and challenges. So I mean, that's what makes it interesting. So let me see. I'll give you a few anecdotes. I had managers, usually the male macho variety, if I were to put the label on it, who did not see the merit in my leadership style, right? Because because I don't lead very macho. I don't know about my teammates who used to be here in this group, you tell me, but my style isn't actually very gung-ho, right? It's a bit more gentle sometimes. And when I'm faced with a manager with a very different style and they didn't see merit, that could put a pause in your career progression, right? As it did me. So my advice would be, don't go at it alone, right? Get help, whether it's from your coach or from your mentor. Make sure that you document and share. That's why you have to be very public with it. Share the business results, share the engagement results with your team, right? Because eventually people around you in the company will hear about it. So the voice of one manager would actually honestly matter less because you have a particular reputation, right? And that opens up new opportunities. And eventually you could move to a new role, right? So I think that's one advice with that story. The other challenge I would sometimes have would be the roles that I expected to get, like whether it was a promotion or a transfer into something else, was delayed or given to another person, right? In those cases, it did require an honest conversation with my direct manager and with human resources, right? So direct manager and HR. So for me, for those conversations, my recommendation would be, because it's a feedback conversation, why did this happen? So I would say, number one, state your ambition, right? So you have to frame the conversation around, I would like to be XXX. How do I get there? Right? And then be open to the feedback because it's a gift. And then you make what I would refer to as a contract. It's more of a more or less an agreement, right? So okay, so therefore, with these sort of things, you guys need to watch. So this needs to change. How will it be measured and observed? What amount of time are we going to give for this? And then therefore, what will be the change that would happen to my career when it gets done, right? So in a way, guys, own it, own the path. Then the last one is, look, sometimes I found that the work environment and myself were really just not a good fit. So I would be constantly gauging and reviewing myself, right? Am I still enjoying it? Is there still a good balance of challenges and fun, right? Am I thriving in the role and what I do? And really, if at some point the answer to those questions are no, maybe it's time to then just consider a change, path and direction, right? And just do a shift.
Yeah, I agree. If it's not working for you anymore, time to move on. Don't get stuck. I think it's such an important part of talking about pathway to the board, whether it's men or women actually, is that it's not always going to go to plan. In fact, it would be unlikely if in a long career over several decades, your career, it always did go to plan. I think the important thing to do is that when it doesn't go to plan, when something doesn't work out, is just getting back up again and dusting yourself down, and after a little time of kind of reflection, heading off out again, and just accepting that this pathway to the board is not a nice, neat stairway. It's more of a sort of twisting, turning mountain pass, really. So yeah, so just stay with it. And sometimes they're going to be fabulous, and sometimes they're going to be more difficult. And just that's all part of the process. It's all part of the process. So thanks. I think, keeping an eye on time as well, we just have time to ask one more question, I think, before we open back out to everybody else, which is, well, we've talked about how important it is that women get on the board, and we've also talked about how that takes a lot of resilience and, over a long period of time. So what can we do? What can we do as women to support women wanting to progress to these jobs at executive board level, key jobs at executive board level?
Okay, so I would say, and look, we talked about support starts from home and support starts from your partner, right? So for sure, as women, we need to be unafraid to actually have that honest conversation with our partners on helping us as a support. At the same time, do it with your friends, because this is a societal change in mindset that needs to happen, right? So just normalize the idea that, of course, women can also have full-time careers. And of course, men and women have equal roles for childcare. How do we then do it? How do we get the support? Do we pay? Do we borrow? But that has to be there, right? Team effort, as I said, really. Same thing with your kids. When they get old enough, get their support as well, right? So it's all that. So for me, support starts from home. Now, as women, especially for us in the professional field, I would just repeat a bit of what I said earlier. So make sure that, offer yourself as a mentor, right? Or as a sponsor, or help get coaches, right? Because companies are in the best position to provide support for their female staff. So encourage your company to actually have a mentoring system and a coaching system and hire it out to help the female group, because I think that's really quite important. And the last piece I would say, we women, oh my God, we are amazing, okay? And what will be great, and even better than that, is if we actually shed light on each other, right? Each of our lights shining bright, but also shining light on others when we see them succeed. And only then do we actually carry each other forward and celebrate.
What a fabulous place to come to the end of this part of the interview. It's absolutely fabulous. Shine a light on other women and celebrate for all of us. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Marjorie, for such a generous, honest, and practical sharing of all your amazing experiences. And I'm going to ask Isa, time for a couple more questions from everybody else.
Yes, we do have a few more questions. So let me see. There was one from it's from Tan. So she's asking, women tend to have imposter syndrome, especially climbing up in the corporate ladder. Did you have self-doubt moments? And how did you manage and overcome that?
Yeah. Yes. In a time, my self-doubt was actually, remember, I would be entering a new country, a new culture every 3 years or so, right? So a lot of that doubt was really, oh my God, how do I fit in? How do I connect? How do I, so for sure that happened. Sometimes it was work, but to be honest, as you know, the thing is, when I mentioned earlier, my personal mindset is, to be honest, I don't think much about myself. Like I try not to, I just focus on what are the skills needed, what can I give personally, doing my best, right? So I don't hold myself to a certain thing. I just say I will do my best and deliver. That way kind of helps with imposter syndrome, because then I never feel like I'm pretending. I'm just doing my best, right? So that is what I would advise, right? Rather than thinking I have to be the perfect marketing director, just be, what is it that we need to do? Okay, I'm going to give the best insight. I'm going to have the best campaign. I'm going to make sure that the results and growth happen. And that's it. You kind of focus on all of that as opposed to an external expectation. And in that way, I hope it will help keep any imposter syndrome at bay. I don't know, Isa and Catherine, if you wanted to add anything on imposter syndrome, because obviously, as women of the world, that's a big topic that we constantly manage.
You have to watch yourself, because I don't think it was something that was constantly on my shoulder, but it was sort of subconscious, just where it's a dangerous place to be. So like you say, you have to focus on the job in hand and go, actually, I have a huge job to do here and I'm just going to get on and do it. The one thing I would guard against, though, is, and this is so hard, it's so hard, is not being over self-effacing, because let's face it, men wouldn't. And I think I think that's still something we still have to work on, really, is you'd have a huge job, you deliver it really well, and then you go, oh, thank you, but I'm just not going to stand up and blow my trumpet very loud. Whereas a man would have been shouting from the rooftops and nobody would have been in any doubt who'd done all of this. And I think we don't want to kind of go to that point, but I think there's still something to be learned about how we positively and energetically, take recognition for the things that we've actually done as women.
I love that. Yep. Taking that on.
And if another woman, I would shine the light on you. If you're too shy to raise your own bench, I'll raise it
absolutely.
for you. Take a look at what she did. It was amazing.
Yeah. Celebrate all of us together, as Marjorie said. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Marjorie and Catherine, for leading a wonderful masterclass today. If you enjoyed today's session, please join us again at our next masterclass. Actually, we're featuring Sir Pill at our next masterclass, and she's going to talk about women leading in very male-dominated sectors. So some of you are familiar with this, so she's going to focus the next session on that. Now, heads up, we have a live event in New York this June. If you are from the area, please do join us. You'll find more information about it in our LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook accounts. Another thing that's coming up is our WOW Scholarship Program. It's kicking off soon for our foundation program. If you know of a promising young woman who would benefit from WOW coaching, please tell them about us. Tell them to follow us on Instagram. Now, we have other events coming up, and so please follow us on LinkedIn too for more information. That's it for today. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again next week. Bye.
Bye.